everybody. Welcome back to the TFL studio in lovely downtown Mission Valley, San Diego. Steve Govett back with you guys. I'm thrilled. This is a really special episode 5 for me. And I got some old friends. At least I think they're friends. I'm not sure if they think I'm their friend, but that's another story altogether. Teammates with the Philadelphia Wings, our general manager with the Philadelphia Wings, and longtime friends. First and foremost, the elder statesman of the National Lacrosse League and the Silver Fox. I mean, we had Gary and Paul on last week. I guess they're the Silver Foxes. But Mike French, illustrious Mike French from the Philadelphia Wings, who's now an owner in New England and residing in Philadelphia, I believe. So joining us from lovely Philadelphia, and the captain of the first and best captain, in the history of the Philadelphia Wings, and color guy extraordinaire for those same Philadelphia Wings from lovely Conshohocken, Pennsylvania, Scott Gabrielsen of your Philadelphia Wings, and an old friend, old teammate who's coming from us from a beach somewhere in Long Island, Jimmy Rogers, who was introduced early on in this process by either Jamie Hanford, Jay Gelbert, or Andy Towers, as if Las Vegas was a person, it'd be this guy. So, Jimmy Rogers, welcome to the show. Fellas, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here, Steve. Congrats on what you're doing here. It's fun.
You know what? Having lots of fun doing it, bringing a lot of cool guests on, and now I got you guys. So, look, really excited.
Great to see you, boy. Great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys, and back a little background history of obviously. Jimmy and I joined. I think Jimmy joined the Wings a year before I did. Gabe's was there for a while. Mike was assembling the juggernaut and pulled off the trade of the century by getting Gary and Paul Gate for a bag of balls. I mean, the genius of Mike French as a general manager is that he was able to get these two illustrious players and twins from Canada and great Syracuse players out of Detroit for, I don't know what he had to give up, but I think it was next to nothing.
I've made that was the last great trade I made. I haven't made anyone since. Now, remember, I'm the guy that had Max Siebel picked over Matt Vink.
Well, looking back, I mean, obviously the Philadelphia Wings of the 90s were a dynasty, and 89, 90, right, Gabes? I think were championships there, and then 94, 95, 98, and then 2001, and then, they fell off the face of the earth because Frenchie came back into the front office, I think. But anyway,
it's true.
Anyway, fellas, I just want to start kind of at the very beginning of this process. Jimmy, how did you get a stick put in your hand for the first time?
Lacrosse stick probably was not until 7th grade. I was a big hockey player and all that, but I was going to a little small middle school, and my hockey coach at the time, Booker Nevius, handed me a plastic stick that I didn't know what to do with, and said, "I want you to come out in the spring, put the baseball glove down, and I think you'll make do." And the love of the game didn't take long to take on, and it was just so grateful for that. It's fun.
Gabes, how about you back in Princeton, New Jersey?
Princeton, New Jersey. I'm a little brother. So I'm 3 years younger than my older brother. My older brother started to play. I picked up a stick in 4th grade, which was very young at the time, and just wanted to play with my big bro and his buddies, and, got the shit kicked out of me for years as a little kid, and just loved the game. I played football, basketball, and lacrosse, and loved it.
And it paid off.
Paid off.
All-American of Vermont. Are you the only All-American from Vermont, aside from recent events?
Yes, basically. Ian McKay it's now the Buffalo Bandits. He was the next All-American after me. It's like, 28 years or something.
Well, the beauty of my college career is the fact that they discontinued the program at Radford, so none of my records will get broken. So unfortunately, that's not going to happen for you guys, because I think they're going to keep the program where Mike French is from at Cornell. Who is going through another coaching change, but I'm sure you've got a hand in that, and we can talk about that a little later. But who put that wooden stick in your hand, Mike, way back in 1905?
Well, first I'd like, before I give you that very vital piece of information, I want to say that I'm not a fan of this Zoom. I'm looking at this thing and I see my red face, and then around me I see you three handsome stud muffins, right? Gabe's still got that Chippendale kind of a physique, and I see you looking at you. You're always looking good. Raj has got that whatever that thing is on his lip. So I'm not, and I'm pink. So I don't like this format, but Steve's been a long time friend. I'm gonna follow through with it. About the stick.
It's not the format, right? It's actually your face.
It's my face. Yeah. Well, I'd like it to be a podcast with no handsome dudes surrounding me like you guys.
Reggie, I'm actually going to take a picture of it because my internet's kind of frozen, so you're even more bloated and stuck. So
I don't have the same. I got to get a makeup man. The stick. I grew up in Canada, and there was obviously no Tupperware back then. So I think my neighbor, an older neighbor, on my street said, why don't you try this thing? And back then, you had like one stick. Now our players have like, 50. And you have like one stick, and you usually put fiberglass tape around it so it wouldn't break or crack. But, I know that when I was probably in Bantam, not middle school, Bantam, I think I got my dad called up Joe Logan. And I don't know, Steve, you know who Joe Logan is.
I know who it is.
Joe Logan. And if you had a Logan with a handmade wooden stick, like, Alfie Jocks makes now, and there was Etienne Martin, but I got to go up there with a couple of my buddies. My dad put the order in, and we went up like 2 weeks later and picked up a Logan. And that was the stick that everybody wanted. And they were, Joe would only make so many. And he'd only give them to certain people. So I was lucky to get them.
They were pretty special at the time. I do remember that. And without, look, this is a conversation about the National Lacrosse League and the mill back in the day and those stories. And we could spend a lot of time talking about really what was a Hall of Fame career at Cornell and for Team Canada. And Mike French certainly illustrious from his dedication and contributions to the game of lacrosse and Canadian lacrosse. But talk about, Mike, how you got involved with the Philadelphia Wings and Russ and Chris and the major indoor lacrosse league at the time. Tell us how that started.
Well, I consider myself a tweener. I graduated from college in '76, and when the Old Pro League, so I was on the young end of the Old Pro League, and I applied to graduate school as a backup, and luckily I did, because the league folded in '76. You remember Montreal had the Olympics, and the Montreal professional team couldn't use the forum. And so Toronto folded, the whole league folded. So I was supposed to go second after Frank Urso. I was going to go to the Maryland Arrows. I was going to go to the Philadelphia Wings. That was my big hope. It went down. So there was no pro lacrosse for a long time. And then in 1987, first of all, they had the Canadian-US game at the Spectrum, which was a gong show. People were throwing chairs and there was fights all over the place. And then,
so nothing's changed. Nothing's changed in Philly.
Yeah.
No, it was really crazy. People were throwing cans and beers. It was looked like our game. A couple of the games we played back against
Detroit in '93 or whatever that was, '94.
Yeah.
We're gonna skip that chapter of this discussion.
So the Eagle League. It was the Eagle League, if you remember, Steve, when it first started. That lasted for about a year, about as long as I lasted, because I actually had a good job back then. I was 34, and Hunt's called me up and said, "Why don't you play?" And back then, we have a history now. I thought it was kind of like, is this thing going to even happen? And he said, "Well, I got your brother to play." I said, "Oh, okay." So I said, "You know what? I played for Canada in '82. I hadn't, was bad shape, and then." He said, "Come on and play." So my brother called me up and said, "Why don't you try playing? John Grant Sr.'s playing. We got all these guys that you know." And so I signed up. And I signed up for the Eagle League, Philadelphia Wings. I think it was a 14 league. We, I remember some of the games. Like we had two goalies. We had Kevin Bilger and Mark Michelle. None of them ever played indoor. They were terrible. They were terrible. And they would admit it too. And then we had
wearing next to nothing in gear, right? Like if you look at the goalies now compared to the goalies in that, they were wearing literally baseball shin pads, and yeah, it was a different era, no question.
I remember.
I could have scored.
I remember in one game we were playing and we were it was our first goalie, Bilge, let in 20 goals, and we're halfway through the game. And so they put in Mark Michela, and Tucker grabbed the ball at center and just rolled it down, and it went between his legs and in the net. And that was his warm-up. And keep in mind, there was about 15,000 people at this game. So they started laughing and throwing stuff. But anyways, I kind of got involved with Hunt's making the call. My brother twisted my arm, and I knew that, we'd have, some good players from the old league, like Senior. And so I gave it a shot. And that's when I met Chris and Russ. And, at the first when I met Chris, he was kind of adamant. He wanted to do it on roller skates. I don't know if you heard about that.
Well, it's an interesting story because I think, the story I heard from Chris Fritz was he was flipping channels back and forth between rollerball and an NCAA game that was on television. And he's like, we got to do this. And then he went to you and said, hey, we got to do this. And all of a sudden it was like, yeah, no, they're already doing that in Canada.
Yeah. I can tell you, it was, it was crazy, but somehow it evolved and it got to where it is now, which is, really probably the best spectator sport I think that's out there. So,
Gabe, so you walk into the locker room. When was that? 90, 89?
88, 89, my rookie year. And let me just give some shout outs to Mike French, and because this is TFL and this guy's a TFL, and we're going to talk a lot of stories about the Wings and the pride and tradition and the championship pedigree that was started. But when you got a guy like Mike French, the legend, leading our team as our GM, it kind of set the tone right there. And the guys that were in that locker room, we all were winners. We were guys that came from different backgrounds or different schools, but we all had a mentality. We all had a tremendous pride of Philly, So walking in the locker room in Philadelphia at the Spectrum, where the Sixers played and the Flyers played. We're lacrosse players. We, got to realize a childhood dream to be a pro lacrosse player. And although we didn't get paid a lot, when you walk into the Philadelphia Spectrum and there's 16,000 fans rooting for you, there's nothing like it. And it was really special,
So how did you make it on a team? Like, what was it? Just you guys, you were close with Frenchie and, I'll
go back to that. So my story again from high school. So I was supposed to go to Johns Hopkins, and I tell kids this a lot. I'm an early recruiting fallout. Okay. I was going to Hopkins. I was recruited my sophomore year in high school. And by the time I graduated and they saw my grades, they're like, Gabrielsen, you're not admissible to Hopkins. You're not in. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm an All-American lacrosse player. I'm 6 foot, 185 as a high school senior, and they're like, no. So my brother was at Vermont. I ended up going to Vermont. Long story short, my dad was working in Philadelphia, so I was playing summer league lacrosse in Philadelphia, met the great Mike French and his brother Paul. And, I was an All-American. It ended up being an All-American in Vermont. And, Mike basically invited me to camp, and it came down and had a tryout where I had my Vermont helmet on, which was the wrong color helmet. Everybody else was Maryland and North Carolina and Penn and all the big schools. They're like, who's this random guy with the yellow and gold helmet on? John Nostrand was the 2-time All-American for D3 and midfielder of the year, and Brian Willard was a midfielder of the year for Maryland. And at the tryout, they both got cut, and I made the team. So it's something I want to do. I'm more like a golden retriever just chasing a ball. And Mike saw that, Dave Evans saw that, and that was my role.
So, Raj, talk about the tryout process, because literally I remember this in my first tryout in 93, in the fall of 93. It's literally 2 weekends. Like you get 4 sessions. You're either in or you're out, and you better prove yourself pretty quick.
Absolutely. And hey, I'll go quickly to the TFL, but Frenchie, totally started it all. And my quick, having played at Villanova, shout outs back to my Booker Nevius in 7th grade, put a stick in my hand, but he never told me I had to use the left. So I never used the left until probably about 4 years ago. But going through Villanova, I got to know the MAB paint guys and Mike French. I went to Vail a few times, and Mike was like, "You're the kind of guy I want to come out for the wings." And at that time, that was the furthest thing from my mind is pro lacrosse. I didn't fancy myself a lacrosse player other than maybe buy some shots at the bar and tell some good stories and jokes, which we'll get into that part later. But Frenchie invited me out to this tryout, and I had no clue. I'm walking down. I'm thinking the whole weekend, what am I getting myself into? I'm out of shape. I'm not necessarily a lacrosse player. I only have one hand. But lo and behold, the tryout, like you said, it's 2 weekends. What do I got to lose? What the hell? I'll go down. I know some of these guys from the summer, thank God. And
hey, Jimmy, so quick question on that. Like, you're out of shape and you only have one hand, so you fit in with all the Canadians.
Right. Well, I'm worried about all these Americans that I happen to know from going to Colorado with them every summer, and I know I can't sniff their jocks. But all of a sudden, I'm like, wait, I'm in a hockey rink. I'm much more comfortable being a hockey player, so I'm comfortable with the bounces, the rebounds. And Frenchie just telling me, all you got to do is do what I've seen you do. Just run, hustle, and get every ground ball you can. So,
but Raj,
are you aware that the only reason he invited you out is because you were buying drinks at the bar after all the games in Vail? Were you aware of that at the time?
He did tell me it should fit your style. The tryouts on weekends, so Saturday night I got a great bar in town that we could go to afterwards.
Yeah,
the guy just like you, Raj.
It was unbelievable. The best part, I think, though, about my whole little story is I was commuting from New York with 3 other buddies, very good buddies, a college buddy. I'll leave names out to protect the innocent. But so we were driving back and forth, and he had been on the team the year before. Never dressed in a game, but was one of the 5, practice players and sniffing. So he got a year experience, and he was basically my tutor coach in the car rides for 3 hours. Do this, don't do that. This is what they want to see. This is how you got to play. That's how he made it the year before. So on day 2 of the first weekend, with a whole nother weekend left to go, Dave Evans pulled me aside and actually said, hey, I like a lot what I'm seeing. Stop worrying about tryouts and doing mistakes and this and that. You're on the team. Now I want you to start to fit in with a group. What number would you like to wear? And with that, he offered me the number of my buddy that I was driving down with as one of the 4 jerseys I could choose. So had I chose number 11, which is the one I wanted, but it was my buddy's jersey from the year before, so I didn't take it. I don't know if the legend of Kevin Finneran ever would have grown. But it really turned out to be great. Like, I get in there and sure enough, you walk in and sorry for my phone's going off and on.
It's all right. You're a busy guy. We get it. Very busy. Yeah, very busy. Very important. We get it.
I should say one thing, and I've got to give a shout out to myself. You got me on a good day. It's my 52nd birthday today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Raj.
Yeah, here I am, 52, and I'm thinking about, the January of what was that tryout year? 1990.
Yeah, it was October.
Cali BBQ is proud to be an official sponsor of your San Diego Seals. Buy our slow smoked barbecue at any Seals home game or online anytime at www.calibbq.media.
Hey, Frenchie, talk a little bit about picking a team back then, and maybe you can give some insights as to why these 3 guys made the wings.
Well, first of all, we were quite territorial in, now we're flying people all over the planet. We were pretty territorial, and all the players that we got, a lot of them, and I can go through some of the names, Flinney, Gary Martin, Bates, Nody, Mcavoy, Billy Miller, McGrath, Chris, Danikin, Buzzett. They're all within 20-mile radius for the most part. And so a lot of those guys, you knew more about them. You knew how they play. You heard from you knew their parents, and so they were right there and readily available, and they could always go out and play basketball together. And a lot of that was done at the the old gym at Shipley or at Haverford School, and so that made some of it easy. Oh, you just drop in a couple of guys like Govett, and then you drop in a couple of Gates, and you never know how good they're going to be. But I went in my garage, Steve, when you asked us, and I went in the box and I pulled out as many pictures as I could find of the teams, and I looked at how they were comprised during back in really the glory years, which was that decade, just maybe decade to 13 years, and then in '89. We had a Canadian coach and one Canadian player, Paul French, my brother, right? In '94, we had our best group of Canadians. I'm putting you in that group, Steve. It's you, Dallas, Marachek, and 2 Gates. How could you lose with those 5 guys? That's why we had golden retrievers. That's why we had ground ball guys. That's why we had what we would now call transition guys that can get the loose ball and get it down, because we had – that team was so good, '94. I just looked at it. Forget about the Finnerans and all, the other. But we had a team of really athletic guys that could get the ball to the right people.
So I've told this story before. '94, we win in Buffalo, and all these guys were there.
What a scary party that was.
Well, the party was scary. We can talk about that after. But when we won, we're on the floor. And Ike Richmond, who was a PR guy at the time for the Flyers and the Wings and all that type of stuff, was rounding us up because they were giving Gabe's the cup. And we were all like, no fucking way. We got to get off the floor because people were throwing quarters at us. And the fact of the matter is, and I've told this story before, is I didn't want to get off the floor because I was picking up the quarters because I was only getting $83 a game, and I needed the money. So we were sticking around, but there were batteries flying. There was all sorts of stuff. But Gabes, I want to hit you with just a one name kind of. Tell me a Dallas Elliott story about that time frame when Dallas is a bit of an odd bird. One day I'm going to have him on this show, but I think he's got to earn the right to get on the show because he's not quite hit TFL status yet.
Right. Oh, my gosh. Well, he is a TFL, that's for sure. The GOAT, best goalie of all time. But Dallas was pretty temperamental. He was a little fragile. He knew his stats. He knew his saves. He knew what he was doing. You got to have a little bit of therapy background, and if you're a captain of the team, and I think I used my therapy on him a lot to calm him down, put him in a good frame of mind. We after every game we get suited up and put a tie on, and no tie, no touch, and Dallas didn't know how to tie a tie, so I'd have to tie his tie after every single game, put a little dimple in it, and all that. There are a couple games that he let in a few goals early, and he would start to flip out about his save percentage. And he's like, I'm coming out. And you're like, Dally, no, you're not coming out. He's like, play some fucking defense, guys. Play defense in front of me. I can't make all the saves. And it's like, okay, we'll play tighter defense now. Just don't come out of the game. But he was the best. He was
to chain him to the net. But, Raj, you remember a ton of times on defense when a guy would go behind the net, any particular guy, and you were taking your life in your hands. And if you watch any of the God of Goaltending on Instagram and YouTube, and his YouTube channel is God of Goaltending, go check it out because there's a bunch of great old lacrosse video footage there. But if you went behind the net, when Dallas Elliott was looking at you, you might get a two-hander right across the chin.
Oh, yeah. He was taking out anyone in elevators that came anywhere near his domain. He was a vicious one in there. But like Dave said, the greatest of all time, bar none. I mean, what he did and what he stood on his head for us so many different times when we were either lapsing in front of him. And he gave you enough momentum to keep going. I loved what he
no equipment. He had no equipment on.
Yeah, the story, I just loved when he would come in and, if we were down or flat or we're in a locker room, and he just start ripping off stats and vitals about every Canadian on the floor against us. That guy, we call him this, we call him that. He's got a soft kick and basically give you info to how to get into someone's head or where to hit him or where to hurt or maybe his girlfriend's name. Or it was almost like Slapshot with the old, hey, hand or hands, whose hands? I mean, it was like, he would feel you better. That's what I want you to say to him. And you hear him yelling in your background. I'm like,
he's like, that goalie's a chair. That goalie's a chair.
I didn't quite know what that meant. If he was sitting in a chair, I couldn't score on him either way.
And
I mean, he was the last of the great reaction goalies. I mean, you do see that. Got a goaltending. You got to watch, his videos.
There's a couple throwbacks now in Frenchie for those guys that Christian Del Bianco, who I think is a bit of a throwback to a Dallas Elliott era goaltender who's very reactionary, kind of from the same general area in Vancouver. Here's a kid that grew up East Vancouver, right? Dallas Elliott, and now lives in Portland. He's a huge lacrosse junkie, to say the least, and definitely will be a guest on this show. But Dallas is and he was a unique character. I do remember that. Certainly, he liked the Silver Bullet girls.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Let's go back, Steve. I want you to get him to provide you with his infamous barf bag collection. You remember when we got on flights?
I still have them. In fact, we have a whole book of them after, I think, the 95 championship. Somebody copied them and put a book together. I would love to actually send those out from a social media perspective, because quite comically, he would do a barf bag every trip, and it would be a guy. And there was a number of guys. He did a whole team photo one time, and it was you guys will remember this, but like mine, I had a bit of a reputation. Gabe's was such a good captain that I did a lot of stupid things as a player. And when you got a good captain, right, and you talk about Michael Jordan pushing the right buttons with his guys and this and that, I'm in a situation where Gabe's would go, dude, you're an idiot. Stop doing that. Right. So I had this reputation of not being the smartest guy on the team, smartest player on the team. But he drew me with bolts in the side of my neck with bolt. And then, I'd cut my head open. We don't need to talk about that story, but, with blood gushing out of my head. We've talked about it on other episodes. Our listeners just don't want to hear that story again.
Oh, that's so funny.
That was.
I want to go back to what Mike was saying when he brought up, having both Paul and Gary Gate and Tom Marachek. And you look at the three of us, we were the first line. We were the other three guys on the line, right? So at one time, the first line, say in '95, it was the three of us, Tom Marachek and Gary Gate.
Yep.
So that tells you something right there. I mean, Raj and I, we were the righties. We knew our roles. I mean, the one to credit Mike French and Tony Resch as coach, and it's like you put us in the right position. I knew what I was doing. They took all-American offensive players and converted them into defensive specialists, right? Going back to guys like Gary Martin was the all-time leading scorer at Penn State. Grant Ahmed just beat his record last year. And you got guys like Billy Miller, four-time All-American attackman, McAvoy, me, Raj. You were a scorer. You weren't a D guy, really. And then we all turned into defensive specialists because all we had to do was get the ground ball and throw it to Gary Gate, throw it to Tom Marachek. You kidding me?
That's all Gary and Tom would tell me. They said, stand by the edge of the crease and just hold your stick by your ear. Just hold it up there. It's going to hit you. And all of a sudden, you'd be sitting there and something will come whirling around the head and hit you in the stick. Like, oh, geez, it's in my stick. And the other thing, and get back to the midfield.
It's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to play your role, right? When your role is as simple as go get the ball and give it to Gary Gate. Right. Yeah. So name two guys you don't want to sit next to in an NLL locker room. Any guy in the –
One guy, Tom Ryan. Post-game, post-practice, Tom Ryan, dreadlocks down to his back, just smelled. Never forget being in a bar after practice, Raj. We're up in Petty after a practice, and we're all showered. He didn't shower, right? He didn't wash his hair. He had dreadlocks. They were like 2 feet long. And all of a sudden, we're just sitting there, turn around, and like somebody says, hey, Tom, you want a beer? And he turns around, and his dreadlocks just all flow like predators, tentacles, and just splashes us in the face. Like sweat just hits like Raj and I in the face. We're just like, oh my God, like horrible,
Raj, how about you? Who do you not want to sit next to in a locker room?
Well, he might be one of my all-time favorites, and he's going to kill me for it, but I don't know about sitting next to Hanford every day of the week in a locker room, but you don't know what you're gonna get, where a hand's going, if there's clothes going on, coming off,
His hairy ass.
fluids. And, it could be the farm animal could get out into him. You never know. Plus, he obviously can manhandle me and just crunch me up into a little folding chair and take me wherever he wanted. So I had to keep my distance at all times.
Frenchie, how about you?
I would say that, Steve, you probably said I avoid the locker rooms now because back when I was playing these barns, were like in Brampton and Owen Sound and in St. Catharines, these locker rooms were so bad. They were so tight. You're in there. I wouldn't want to sit. I'm just going to say goalies. Goalies have there's giant bags. They have equipment all over the place. A lot of them are sweat a lot because they're fat. Not like Dallas, but some of them. And I just like to stay away from goalies. So I would just park myself on the opposite side, right when I was playing as a young kid.
So, fellas, I want to tell a quick story, and then I want to let you guys kind of riff from there. But, we were playing one time up in Long Island against the New York Saints, and you played at Nassau Coliseum, and the Wings had a tradition, and when we played up there, that most of the time we didn't stay up there, that we actually got on a bus and came back to Philly, and we partied in Philly. And, Raj, who lived in New York, missed out a couple times. But I remember distinctly getting on a bus and Johnny Nostrand, who is, I think, now the coach at Gilman, am I right? Was it a longtime coach in Philly, and a lot of people remember this guy. But Nody was on the microphone and talking about things about his wife, and his wife was on the bus with us. And we were all like, oh, my God, I can't believe you're saying that. And it was the most hilarious thing in the world. But we, a few pops flowed, and we're on the bus on the way back. And all of a sudden, one of our players gets stuck in a bathroom in the bus. And nobody could get this guy out for the whole trip. And he stayed in that bus until we got back to the hotel where we were all staying in Philly. And Ike Richmond, Ike Richmond goes to let him out, and they had to open the emergency door in the bathroom. Chris Batesy pushes the door out of the bus, knocks out freaking Ike Richmond on the ground with the emergency window, and he goes like running away, like a guy that had been cramped up in a bathroom for basically the better part of 2 hours, and we couldn't get him beer, we couldn't do anything. He basically knocked out Ike Richmond and ran into the hotel. So
look who's calling.
Oh, guess. Yeah.
Hanford's already tracking me down.
Don't take that call. He probably heard you. But anyway, we got a lot of good road trips, and we got, a lot of good post-game parties. But tell me your most memorable, Raj, of all those times.
Well, I don't know, memorable. I'm just sitting here and hearing everything. I want to give major shout-out and props. We talked about Frenchie, TFL, and Gabe's, you said, was your first captain, Steve. My first captain and total freaking legend, was Tony Resch. Tony Resch is definitely got to be said in hierarchy in this crowd, and what he represents, what he did as on the field, was the captain of my first year when I didn't really dress, but what he instilled in all of us. And then Gabe's took over after that. But really what we were best at, we were a family, and we did everything and anything for each other at any moment, anywhere. We would dive through walls for each other, pick up ground balls. We would do everything and anything. And it would start it from the top, from Frenchie down through Tony Resch, down through Gabe's. And that's really what made it awesome and what made us so well. I would never have played had not Frenchie get me out there. But my first year, I remember Tommy Marachek. Here's all everything out of college. The greatest player. I was in awe when he's coming out practicing. It's the Wednesday before our first game ever on the year I'm going to finally play maybe, and Coach Resch has basically instilled the rule, hey, if you don't practice the Wednesday before a game, you're not dressing. It's flat out. His first-year coach, Tom Marachek, first-year player. Tommy decides to, thankfully, go to his girlfriend's senior prom up at Syracuse on that Wednesday night.
I think it was her high school senior prom, right?
It was that, whatever, but he chose not to go to practice. And the Friday before the game, Coach Resch reads out the lineup, and lo and behold, I'm in the righty position across from Gary and Paul, and Tommy's name's not mentioned. And he's just like, hey, you might have made a mistake there. You might have made a mistake. And he said, no, Roger's dressing you out. He looked at me, didn't know me at all really yet, and was just like, this Chooch is playing over me? I mean, thankfully that next game, I think it was Sal Acasio. Sorry, Sal, but he let a few easy ones in on me, and I got 2 goals, so I never kind of came out of the lineup. But even that, Tony stood his ground. Tommy had to bend and buckle, and I'm not Tom Marachek, bought in and became family and one of the greatest, obviously, wings ever, and flashed to Jesus. 2001, you know, I was GMing, and we had a good team to a great team.
How did you get the good team?
Well, there was a GM a little bit before me who did some things, picked some guys that maybe fit into the right pieces. Again, I just carried a red knapsack around and bought Frenchie shots, so I kept it. But I got to get other props. I mean, we had Mark Millen, one of the greatest players ever in the history of the game. Everything, all world, you name it. Was all pro everywhere to that date, but never really kind of won, I would say, if you want to say that way. Was a big piece of our 01, but he bought into the family, and it slowly got to him. By the time the championship came around, there's no way we win that 01 championship against Toronto without him. And it was because he totally morphed his game to what we needed and what was best for us and for the family. And I think, that's really what I took out of this thing. And I try to take away everywhere I go and everywhere I've gone since then. It's just the family and do anything and everything your brother first type mentality that came from the top. It was just awesome.
It was special. And Steve, I mean, we brought you in. You came in your first practice. You had a football face mask. You had a quarterback mask on, right? We're like, who's this guy? Big Haas lefty Canadian. I mean, you fit right in. You were an edge that we needed to make that team. And again, we went on a run. The Wings, for my 10 years, I played in 8 championship games in my 10 years. I mean, the Wings played in the championship every year. And the rivalry we had with Buffalo was incredible. From wins and losses, we both knocked each other off from three-peats. We won in 89 and 90, then we lose in 91, but then they go 92. They go 92, 93. And then we beat them in 94. Then we go 94, 95, and then they beat us in 96. Talk about a rivalry. It was awesome.
I'm pretty excited that my next guests on the TFL podcast are Troy Cordingley and John Tavares, and we'll talk a little bit about that rivalry. But Frenchie, talk about the Buffalo-Philadelphia rivalry through that time frame. I mean, it was pretty intense. It was good television. There was a ton of great games between those teams, and obviously through 89 with 1-goal games and, Kevin Alexander scoring goals and Derek Keenan playing for Buffalo through John Tavares and Hamley and the list of guys that ultimately ended up being NLL executives. And one of the hallmarks, I think, of that Wings team, and we say this, Gabes, you and I have had this conversation a few times, is that every guy has gone on to be a leader in his particular expertise, and has done great things beyond, kind of where they were in that. So every guy has come out as a leader in some fashion. So it was pretty cool. But Frenchie, talk a little bit about that rivalry.
Yeah, well, just before I do that, I just want to tell you that I remember we invited Steve to come up to camp. I can't say I was really brilliant, but when you had Paul and Gary recommending them, what are you going to say? No. So, and Paul being very smart, he knew that he needed somebody to set him free, to do the grinding for him. But those games between Buffalo, when Les Bartley was coaching with Johnny Meridian, and against us, they were dog fights. They had the Kilgores. They were mean. They had some really mean guys. I think we were more talented at times, but they had some real grinder, mean guys, and they were slugfests. And then they had, we had. I was looking at these pictures. The talent. If you remember the core guys that did all the scoring. Everybody remembers Tom Marachek, Jake Berge, Kevin Finneran, and the Gates. But some of these other guys that we had that were performing those, like you said, golden retriever roles that really are the strength of your team. Because if you don't have the ball, it's the same in the league today. you don't have guys that can get the ball, transition guys that can move the ball, that can go in the corners, find it, you're not going to get it to the guys that can end it, to finish it for you. But those games, I grew up with Les Bartley and Gypsy, and I hated them. you just despised them. I actually fired Johnny, so that ended up in a later era. But yeah, and when we played at home against Buffalo, we were going to have close to a packed house, and we know when we played in Buffalo, all the Canadians coming over the border to see the game, they look forward to it, and they'd have close to a packed house.
Raj, one of my special memories of a game in Buffalo happened in a post-game party in Le Club, and you were dancing with a relatively rotund young lady, and she tried to do the Dirty Dancing lift with you, and so she ran at you. I want to say she was, give or take, 250 to 400 pounds, and you tried to do a lift like Dirty Dancing with her, and it didn't go very well for you.
No, well, if you do any of the math on that, it's just sheer physics. But yeah, I mean, at that time, my claim to fame was I was never hurt on the field, but I had 2 bad injuries that I had to tell Millsy, keep it quiet, don't tell coach what happened. But in Buffalo, I was trying to do it off the top rope, and I slipped, and my ankle kind of blew up a little bit. I don't know, can I go next week? Tell him I heard it in practice, but. Yeah, some of those post games. I mean, you were talking about the '94 game. Not only were we getting hit with batteries and quarters, but then we had to walk through the halls of the old Buffalo Auditorium, getting pelted. We had that pink champagne that they gave us in the locker room. Remember? So you only had one pair of spandex. You only had one pair of spandex shorts to begin with, and they already had a hole in them. And now they got pink. I'm like, I need these for next year. The budget, I'm not going to get a new uniform.
Hey, wait a minute. You got beer tickets? What about the beer tickets?
Well, then we went to the post game, and they basically almost burnt the hotel down. All the the reservationists got pissed off. We were Phillies in here partying with us. What are they doing? Police, ambulances, fire. It was craziness.
To explain the Buffalo Auditorium really quickly, because I think for our listeners who have never seen this in a modern building. When we left the floor, we walked out, we were on the concourse of the arena. And they had these, if you remember, the elevator gates that pulled apart but were open, right? And they had those lined up so that we could walk to our locker room, but we were literally walking on the concourse of the arena after we won a championship in Buffalo with an absolutely rabid crowd. I remember specifically
people spitting at us and throwing stuff and yelling at us and chirping at us. And I was trying to get to the payphone.
No offense, Frenchie, but it was like a 65-year-old security guard trying to hold the gate back with all these crazy men.
I'll never forget that experience. It was, obviously my first championship in this organization with the Wings, but in the National Lacrosse League, my first championship of all of anything I ever did. But ultimately, that will be a permanent, indelible memory for me. Is those people behind that gate, like literally, it felt like we were going into the Thunderdome in a movie. That it was just bizarre. Gabes, what do you remember about all that stuff?
I just say, the sharpest steel goes through the hottest flame, and just remember that one. That one was sweet because in '92, Buffalo was an expansion team. They beat us in overtime in the Spectrum, 11-10. The following year, we rematched them again at Buffalo, and Buffalo beats us 13-12 at the Aud, and that damn horn was just blasting. So we lost two in a row in the championship game to Buffalo. And then that 94 year, talk about just absolute desire and being pissed and not giving up, whatever it takes. That game, we blew them out 26-15. Paul Gate had 6 goals in the third quarter. We mopped them up.
Remember, he scored one of them. He turned around, he went,
yeah, he did. Right. That was one of the times, and actually that's the fun thing to kind of go off of that. We won often, but we lost as well, right? And it kind of it gave us our edge. It gave us our drive, and that's what made this team so special. Yeah, we won 5 championships in those 90s or late 80s to 90s, but we also lost 3, to Buffalo. So it kind of built the character of us. It wasn't all roses for us. We got shit on a little bit, so it just built the character of the team.
A quick break. This episode is sponsored by Manscaped.com. Manscaped is the only men's brand dedicated to below-the-waist grooming and hygiene. If you've been listening to our channel for a while, you know that we are big fans of Manscaped and their Perfect Package Essentials Kit, which is the world's finest all-in-one manscaping kit that makes manscaping safe and easy. And just when you think they've got it all figured out, they take it to the next level. I'm excited to be one of the first to confirm that after 18-plus months of research and development, the new Lawnmower 3.0 waterproof body trimmer has just been released and comes with a ton of new upgrades. Get 20% off plus free shipping from your Perfect Package 3.0 purchase when you use promo code SEALS20 at manscaped.com. That's code SEALS20 for 20% off at manscaped.com. Now, back to the pod.
So I want to shift gears just a quick, but I want you guys to talk about, and Frenchie, you can talk about not the guys on this call, but who's the most underrated player that you ever came across?
I think, I mentioned a lot of them. A lot of them you wouldn't. I forgot about them, and you're asking me who's the most underrated. I forgot about them. That's
underrated. They're very, very underrated.
So I had to go back and by inviting us on, I had to do homework for this. So Gary Martin, think about Gary Martin. What he did for those teams, how hard he played, how tough he was. Billy Miller. Same thing. Now, like you said, Gabe's offensive guys that were grinders. They were doing all of the dirty work, and so many Batesy. Like you said, these guys have been successful coaches and successful businessmen. People forget about a guy like John Mcavoy. McAvoy played D, and he was an unbelievable. He had one of the quickest first steps of anybody. You got O'Grady, you got Denikin. A lot of these guys, I would say were underrated. Brian Volker, he was underrated. We had a lot of guys. I don't even think that Kevin Finnerman was very much underrated. I don't think he's been appreciated. I actually think, and I know he does. I actually think that he's a Hall of Fame candidate for the National Lacrosse League. And
Jimmy, how about you? Tell me an underrated player.
The first name that always jumps out at me is Johnny Mcavoy, and simply because I had the pleasure of playing with him at Villanova, or playing for him really on Villanova, and he did everything. And then he was the most underrated college player. No one knew who he was. Hometown kid in Pennsylvania, just happened to go to Villanova right down the street. Never really coached in high school, and his athleticism and Frenchie, like his quickness and first step, he was just unbelievable. And then to go on to the wings with him and watch him completely change his game into this little rugrat, tough as nails, grinder, taking knees out, take the ball both ways, smart with the ball. He's always been my most underrated.
I forgot Flinney. Come on.
I was going to say Chris Flynn, too. Can't forget Flinney. The juice man.
You know what? I think about underrated guys on that team, and Paul Denikin had some of the sweetest, softest hands, to be able to catch the ball and finish, at least in the indoor game. There's a lot of great players that played in the outdoor game, and I'll talk about that in a second. But Paulie Denikin, who played on the power play and caught like some of the most unbelievable passes coming at him, and granted, right, Raj, just hold your stick right there, I'm going to get it to you type of stuff. Well, Denny had a way to finish, and so one of the most underrated players on that team. One of the things that I've kind of come to realize after reflecting on these podcasts and over time is just a number of guys throughout the league that were superstars in college and then ultimately went on to become like great NCAA players that turned around and played in our league, and Petro and Patty McCabe, and just the list goes on and on of real legends of the game that played at this, Brian Volker, Chris Bates, that all go on to coach in the NCAA, John Tillman, Ricky Sewell. There's just so many guys that are peppered throughout the NCAA Division I ranks or otherwise that played in our league that seem to be forgotten in the annals of history, but really contributed to a significant history for the Mill and the National Lacrosse League. And I love getting on here talking with guys that remember those guys and watch them play, because they were pretty special. So I'm going to throw some names at you guys, and we've talked about a few of them already, but I'm going to do this quickly. Just your initial reaction and maybe one or two words about each guy. And tell me about Tony Resch.
I got to give a thank you for standing up to the prom date and giving me my shot. But just the man, the myth, the legend. I mean, all he does is win and just instill championships in everyone.
And still doing it.
Yeah.
He's a TFL all the way. A guy that led by example. A guy that basically knew what buttons to push for every player, every teammate that he played with. Just a great coach. He was a Phil Jackson type, and he's got the rings to prove it. That's a great parallel right there. But Frenchie, I know he was pretty close with you through that stage and that process. And
yeah, I remember when he just retired and Russ and Chris didn't want to make him the head coach, and they said, "Will you do it?" And I said, "He's a better coach than me. He knows the game is probably better than me. He's more current than me." And so I said I would do it, but I didn't do it. I never went on the bench once. And Tony, who I think is cerebral, methodical, and always prepared, he can break down the game. And you know what? He's not a man of a lot of words. But when
he'd be terrible on the TFL podcast, regardless of the fact that he is a TFL. He'd be terrible on my podcast.
He might not give you.
Not asking him to be a guest on my podcast.
Yeah, he's proven it, like you said, Steve. Everywhere he's gone, he's been good with the U.S. teams, and in the pro outdoor, indoor. And he was, I think he served as head coach for about 8 years for us. And he had a pretty good record.
Well, one of the things he did do, and all of us were kind of involved in this, was the Heritage Cup in 2003, I think, 2002 Heritage Cup that we ended up putting together with Scott and Jimmy, myself, and Tony Resch was the coach, and ended up beating the Canadians. And probably, I think, the only time the U.S. in indoor has beaten the Canadians, at least in the modern era. That was and it was 26-15 or some crazy score, and that was a team made up of a bunch of guys that are now, if you look back on their careers, considered legends. And Ken Finno was on that team, and Jake Berge and Hanford Jalbert. The list goes on and on of guys. Roy Colsey and just a ton of guys, Brian Reese. And to add to that, Steve, as you bring up the Heritage Cup, Mike already touched on it. Like the makeup of our wings teams, that we needed the grinders, like the three of us and Flinney and Tony and Gary Martin. I remember that roster. You guys put it together, and I was just privileged to be part of the staff. But we had grinders on that team. We had ground ball guys. We had guys that would get the ball to the other scorers. And the one thing that the Canadian team didn't is they had the top scorers in the NNL from like 1 through 15. They didn't have one guy. They didn't have one transition guy. No, it's like, who's going to get the ball for them? They thought it was going to be an exhibition game, and we were coming loaded for bear. I will say this. I'm very proud, and Mike, you know this, and you are as well, but very proud of my Canadian heritage. But one feather in my cap in my career that I will always cherish that moment was that game when Paul Gates standing next to me at halftime, and we're up by it's 9-2 at halftime. Paul Gate goes, this game's being played in Toronto. He turns to me, he goes, "I'm leaving." He drove back to Syracuse.
Anyway, I'm gonna talk to
Tavares, like Malowski, Sanderson. Like the ball would just sit there in the corner, and we'd have uncontested ground balls in the corner because no one was getting the ground balls. I mean, it was our wings model that we built the team around. It's like you got to have the straw that stirs the drink, that Mike would always say. I mean, Mike, that was also one of the greatest compliments you could ever give to us. And when you'd say it to me, you'd send it to Flinny, to Raj, to Govett. I mean, we just did our role. If I could get 10 ground balls in a game, I had an awesome game. We were fighting to get double-digit ground balls.
Hey, Raj,
I made a T-shirt one year, 9 grinders, 3 this, 2 of that, 4 of that equals 1 championship. That's what it was all about. No.
I still wear that shirt. It still fits.
Hey, I doubt that.
Raj, talk about Tom Marachek. You played with him. Just a couple words on Tommy.
Tommy became the best. We became such good friends. Chuchi, Chenvi, Chachi. Then to get to know him better and
Hollywood.
Get on the golf course with him, and just no better competitor. And I mean, he can grind and compete on a golf course like no other. I think we did a Thanksgiving or 2 up in my apartment in New York. Like, no girlfriends, no family really. He didn't want to go home to Canada. I wasn't going back out. It was a lot of fun. Taught me how to cook a little bit. Great, great, great man. Every once in a while, it's good to catch up with him on a text or an email chain too. And Chuchi, Chachi, Gypsy.
Now the head coach down at IMG Academy, running their lacrosse program down there.
Oh yeah, great.
He obviously was a huge part of the Wings organization. His numbers retired in the rafters, continues to be there, and wonderful, wonderful player. He was very, very humble, very humble guy. He certainly never fixed his hair. He wasn't worried about how he looked.
Yeah, whatever.
Mike Gongas, this one's for you. Sorry, Frenchie. Mike Gongas, this one's for you. Tell me what comes to mind when you think of Mike Gongas, former owner of the New York Saints.
Most unpopular guy in North America. I remember when we, he ran things like it was a club league, and with his team in New York. Everybody from the guy that took out the trash, to his own players, his own management team, his own coaches, they didn't like him. I remember when you guys were in warm-up, right? And I'd sit on the bench, and they had a plan. They tried to hit him with balls. His own team. He'd come out there, he'd kind of waddle on out there, and the next thing you know, and he'd start screaming at him. And I'd say, hey, dude, get the hell off the floor. You're going to get killed. So I would say unpopular and, unfortunate that he was that unpopular because, I think he was in a really great market to really make something good, and it never really happened.
He was
I just always seem to recall every time we went up to New York, and me being from New York, I'd want 20 tickets or this and that. I'd gather them all in the locker. But every time we went there was some kind of foul up with the ticket window, and we never got our team complimentary tickets. We couldn't get tickets. He was never giving anything away for free, that's for sure.
Speaking of New York, and let's stay with that theme, Gabe's, we played against him a bunch of times, and he might have been a chair, but he's in the National Lacrosse League Hall of Fame. Talk about Sal Lacasio.
Sally bag of potatoes. Sal Lacasio. No, I mean he was the best American goalie that we've seen, and we had great rivalries with the New York Saints and going up there and Sal in the goal. Sal is a notorious chirper. He, and granted, I'm not the best shooter. I've scored a bunch of goals on Sal, probably scored more on Sal than anybody else. But when you didn't score, he would chirp. It was like good shot, that kind of stuff that always pissed you off.
Jimmy, you probably know him pretty well, New York guy. I mean, he went to UMass, but obviously a Long Island guy.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I met Sal when I was in 11th grade and didn't even really know who he was, but he was a cousin of a good friend of mine, and we played on a deck hockey team together, and it was our goalie. So I got to know him a little there. But I got a good funny Sal Lacasio story. Paulie Denikin, my teammate for years, came up every year when the Grateful Dead would play in town. Paul Denick and I would always go to a Grateful Dead show. So he came up to New York, Long Island one night. I met him in New York City. We took the train out to my parents' house, get the car. I had second row mint choice seats for the Grateful Dead. Sure enough, we pull into the parking lot. We start playing hacky sack, grabbing beers, get everywhere to go. I reach into my pocket. Guess what I forgot? Those great second row seats to go to the Grateful Dead. Now, that's a sold-out concert. So we're walking around. I don't know what to do. I'm kind of panicking.
You're looking for a miracle.
Paul Denigan goes, I got it. Watch this. Goes and finds a security guard who looks a little overweight by the door. And he goes, hey, Sal Nicasio left me 2 tickets for the Grateful Dead. You got them? He's like, Sal, he left tickets? Where's Sal's tickets? Sal was a legend on Long Island. Everyone knew Sally Bag of Potatoes. One thing is that we got a security guard walking us in with no tickets because we're friends with Sal. But we'll shout out to him.
Talk about J.J. Albert. Anybody? 2 words.
Beast.
Unbelievable athlete.
Fearless.
How about a competitor that we played against? Ultimately, great coach and longtime coach in the league, but Darius Kilgore.
I just say that Darius and his whole family, they played Pee Wee Bantam minor in Niagara-on-the-Lake in Virgil, where I played, and so when I was playing junior B there, he'd come with his whole family, so I got to know him. He is a nice man. He is a nice, mean man on the floor, and what a player, power player, scorer, and really a smart guy and a smart mind. He was a great coach during his stint with Buffalo. I like Richie too. Richie, his brother, real nice guy. So they very talented. He played 19 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Both of them tough as nails on the floor. Darius was mean. I think I got scar under my eye from a butt end he took gave me on a face-off, but just a total badass on the floor and surprisingly a good guy off it. I actually must admit I was very surprised that he was. Him and Rich were as good as they were off the field, but that was the, credit to this game. You'd punch your ticket, and when it was work time, you'd work and want to kill each other, and afterwards, you'd shake your hand and share a beer.
Roger, you popped off for a second. Talking about Darius Kilgore.
Well, it's funny you should say that, but I got some good Kilgore stories too. I mean, back in the day, we definitely have all touched on it. Like, there was no more hated rivalry than Buffalo and Philly and Buffalo and Philly. But I got to know those guys post-game a lot, like Troy, Darius, Richie especially, and we had a few beers together and started building a relationship off the field a little bit. And every time we got together, we'd always cordially say good game and hang out a little bit afterwards. I got a story where one year we were late night back in a hotel room with Richie and Darius, and turned out to be Richie's father-in-law, but I didn't know at the time. It's 3 a.m. We're all drinking beers, this and that. Next thing you know, the guy's looking over, laughing at all our jokes. He turns to me and someone said, you guys played a great game tonight, man. We can never beat the Wings. And he turned to me and just looked, and the fire went off in his eye, like, you're a Philadelphia Wing? And he attacked me and, like, jumped at my neck to take me out at 3 a.m. because he's enraged and I'm a Philadelphia Wing. I'm telling you, Richie pounced up like I was one of his locker room teammates and brothers. Ripped his father-in-law off, threw him down on the ground. You've had enough. Had him shaking up. I mean, that's when I knew I was welcomed into the Kilgore family. And they've been nothing but great people always. And, I got another one with Darius. Oh, guys, like, I can't miss that. The first game I'm ever touching the floor. And I've heard about the Kilgores and I've seen the bandana. And, what a treat he was to play against. Not only was he unbelievably skilled, but he might have been one of the nastiest, scariest, pit bull type mentality, snap on a dime, never knew it was coming.
Yeah.
So it's the first shift I was ever going to go out the front door, and I'm going, and Mike Page was our coach, and he's pushing me to go. And I'm waiting for the D guy to come off the back door, and I'm leaning out. And Darius does his patented, when he comes to the bench full speed, he gets in your box and runs the whole length of it in your substitution box before he ducks that into his door. So he's coming full speed, and I'm standing with my shoulder out a little bit, and I'm like, oh. And he does a chicken wing, kind of fake like he's going to come at me, and I didn't know what to do, so I just put my arms up. But my elbow happened to go up and catch his chin a little bit. And I was like, oh, my God, I just pissed off the wolf. Sure enough, he stopped. He locked it up, and he stood, and he just waited outside of our door with his stick cocked behind his head like this. And Pager's going, go, Raj, go, Raj, go, Raj. I'm like, I'm not stepping out there. Sure enough, when he comes off, I step out the door, and he takes 3 baseball bat swings, and I'm just defending at my shin. But, that was game 1. We long told that story to each other.
Another quick break. Coronado Brewing Company is proud to be the official craft beer partner of the Seals. Enjoy fan favorite Orange Avenue Wit and their new Salty Crew Blonde Ale all season long, and visit coronadobrewing.com to find their award-winning beers near you. Stay coastal. Cheers.
Fellas, I love to close the show with one question, because I think for posterity, I love to have everybody that I have on talk a little bit about the story that is untold in lacrosse. Whatever story that a 30 for 30 topic that you guys would choose if you could make a documentary. And obviously I'm gonna exclude the rivalry between the Philadelphia Wings and the Buffalo Bandits because we've talked about that enough. But if you had one story that you could tell about, the mill, the NLL, your history in lacrosse, that you think would be a compelling enough story to make it to Last Dance status, what would that story be, Gabes?
I think it's an easy one. It is the Philadelphia Wings. It's what this call is all about. It's the story from 1988 through probably 1998, the history and, the success we had, the wins, the losses, the talent, Gary and Paul Gate being the greatest players of all time, just being on the team, playing with them, Dallas Elliott. You look at the Hall of Famers that are on the list. And I think one of the things that's most interesting that you guys touched on it is the Wings tree of success, where if you look at a roster of 94, 95, heck, any of those rosters, what our teammates are doing today in the game of lacrosse is second to none. I mean, everyone is a coaching legend from high school to college to business, you name it. Everybody, I might have been the captain of the team, but I was a captain of captains. Everybody on that team was a captain and a leader of men. And that's something, that's story to be told.
And certainly Raj is a legend of mustaches right now. I mean, that is
the Kevin Dance.
Epic. Absolutely epic.
Hey. I would echo Gabe's, though. Not only those 94, 95. I mean, I was through to 01 as a GM, but Steve, as you stepped in after the Frenchie GM years and what you built and, instilled and what Tony Resch instilled, but then what you took to Denver, the core of, Hanford, Stilley, Jalbert, yourself, and yeah, you surround it with some great players, but that's a Philly deep core that went there and went on for great years of, success, and what you guys built really was a model of came through Philly. And, really was for years and years where everyone's gone since.
Frenchie, how about you? What story would you tell?
Well, I'm gonna go. Maybe we got a couple of Wings documentaries already signed up, and I would say first of all, Steve went to Washington first, so he saw what it was like on the other side of this. Where he was looking for corridors himself, and then he went and that got him the experience and the good fortune to be able to go to Colorado and now west to San Diego. I would just say that I'm going to go back because in the 70s, I remember that there was two players in the United States that were Canadians. And this may sound self-serving and a little bit Canadian focused, but there was two players, and box lacrosse had no respect. They fight, they cross-check. And I remember calling up coaches, go nameless, hey, can Bill Durgel come to practice? Can this guy come to practice? Oh, we got a game. Oh, he can't come to practice on Wednesday because he's got to prepare for a game on Saturday. I go, what? And so there was such a, the evolution of indoor box lacrosse has been remarkable. And I want to say that something happened, and this is self-serving, after that 78 Team Canada win. And so Steve knows, you guys know how passionate, and Steve's the same about, Canada indoor, Canada outdoor, Canada under 19, Team Canada. And if you can see now what it's like there out in the landscape now it's completely flip-flopped. Everybody's got to play indoor. Indoor is the greatest. I know coaches in the NCAA that didn't want anything to do with it. Now they've completely changed their mind and they flip-flopped on it. So I really believe that. And now I'm happy to say there's 300 kids from Canada. I know for me, I was going to General Motors because I had a shift on the night shift. That was my parents told me, that's what you got to do. That's for sure. And I got on the bus, and just like a lot of other guys, now got on buses, planes, and trains, and they've got an education out of it. They've moved to the States, they've integrated with this, so now I see, and I think Steve's a proponent. I want to see more Americans playing in our professional league. And that's starting to happen because there's more inventory, there's more spaces. So I think my 30 for 30, long-winded, would be really about how this game, the appreciation for the indoor game has really flip-flopped from what it was in the 70s to what it is now.
Well, fellas, it's been a pleasure, and I can't say how much you guys mean to me and to my career and personally, my life and the shape that it takes or has taken, and anything that I have done in my life, I give a lot of credit to you guys helping me craft my thought processes and allowed me to mature and grow up. And certainly Mike French was a big part of teaching me something. I tell he used to say things to me in Board of Governors meetings that stay with me, that I tell a lot of people. I tell my kids to this day, and it's, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And unfortunately, I've always never listened to him on that because well, because I haven't. But look, I want to thank you guys. I love you. I appreciate you coming on. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
No, Steve, I thank you for doing this. We love you too. We've been through a lot, and memories that'll last forever. Congratulations to you and the success you've had. We talk about the wings tree of success, to watch what you've done, to now be, from Washington to Colorado to San Diego, and what you're doing out there, and with JSI and the changes you're making for lacrosse, and, Mike as well. And, it's been great catching up with you guys. Raj, it's the first time I've seen you in a few years, but, love you guys like brothers. We share some of the greatest memories of our lives together.
Absolutely.
So, I would just say, Steve, thanks. And, all you guys have made your own breaks, and it's been by, sticking to hard work, grinding, and you've all become successful in a lot of places. Steve's, bounced down to Washington, bounced back up. I even watch his cooking show, and I made the pepperoni chicken. It didn't look as good as yours. It didn't look as good as yours.
Was it good?
It was good. It was good. That's the only meal I've made during the pen or whatever this thing is. So watch his cooking show. I'm going to give it a plug. It's good. He even made a dessert. Last time he made a dessert. That might be my next one, by the way. But you do a lot of good stuff.
I'm a shameless plug. I just bought a Green Mountain pellet smoker grill, and I set it up yesterday. So some of the next TFL kitchen is going to be the cooking on the pellet grill. And let me tell you, there's going to be some great cooking content coming soon.
All right.
And the other thing I'll say is when you do write that book, I got a garage full of material which I'm happy to ship up to San Diego.
Thanks.
Thank you, Steve, for putting this together. It's so great to catch up with you guys and get back, into those. Instantly, you go back 20 years and feel like you're in a locker room and can't wait to get down and see you all Saturday and play together. It's such great memories, and
I hate
all the wing nuts out there. Thank you.
To break it to you. It wasn't 20 years. It was longer than that. But hey, whatever. Fellas, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a blast. We'll have to do it again. I know there's a lot more stories, a lot more people to talk about. But thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, love you, boys.
Thanks, guys.
Fellas,